I like thinking of it this way. God has points in history that are his directive. Like he's decided this will be this, and this will be this, and this will be this. And it's our free will, our libertarian free will, to be associated with God's plan. So would Rebecca have been chosen regardless of the servant's decision to go there? I believe so. But it was the servant's free will decision to be included in God's sovereign plan.
All right, Tony. So this week, Genesis 24 you preached on.
Yeah.
Pretty much the idea is that, at least how you encapsulated it, is that God will go before you. And that's kind of our takeaway from this week. But there was even a couple times in the sermon you mentioned that we won't go there. You know, we're going to stay on track with this line of thought. So what are some of the things that you think you maybe have leftover thoughts on?
Yeah, there are probably, I love this account. I kept saying that because it's one of those like stories that doesn't seem to, it's an important narrative. Like it's obviously it continues the story. Like if it isn't for Rebecca coming, then there is no continuation of the story. So I love that. But there's so many little details in it. As I mentioned, it's the longest chapter in Genesis, the longest chapter in the Torah. And so there's all these little like, these little added like goodies that are found throughout it. I think, one of them, we were talking off camera a little bit, was about how God chooses not from the Canaanites, or rather Abraham chooses not from the Canaanites, but he sends the servant all the way home. And really home is not like those guys are God worshipers either. Like when Laban's like the Lord, he's like, yeah, Yahweh has done this. He's not a Yahweh follower. We know this because when we come back to Rachel and Leah later on, they have all those family gods, all those statues, right? And so we know that he has other gods that he worships, and maybe one among them is Yahweh, but it's not. So why does Abraham prefer the relatives who are idol worshipers to the Canaanites who are idol worshipers in the land? And I think it's because of Genesis chapter 15, where it says that this is the prophecy of, you're going to move from this land until the sin of the Amorites has reached their full measure, and then you're going to come back in. So I think that land is subject to destruction, and so God does not want, through the seed of that land to continue. Instead, he prefers the seed of his own land to continue, which is, I think, a really cool little like connection point that we were able to talk about. But there's a lot of like these little things in the story.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it also makes me think of when we say Lord, a lot of times in the Bible, we're just thinking of it's another word for God, and it's this general term, but when it's all caps, it's supposed to be Yahweh, correct?
Yeah.
So when Laban
it's the tetragrammaton, so it's that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
YHWH.
Yeah.
So when Laban actually says this, he's actually identifying specifically the God Abraham worships.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah. He's saying, oh, I can tell Yahweh did that thing for you, right? Because the servant tells the story, and he's like, look, I was praying and I was asking the God of my master Abraham to move in this great way and to do this thing, and then lo and behold, there she was, and she was a relative, and she watered my camels, and this whole thing, and then he goes, yeah, the Lord was moving, Yahweh was moving,
right.
Yeah. He's not saying God was moving, because today he's saying. That's why when Abraham says it, he says, Yahweh, the God of the heavens and the God of the earth. So he's saying, like, God is not the name, it's the title we use to talk about God, because we come from a nation that believes in a single God. At least, we think we come from a nation that believes in a single God. Right. But that's kind of the... So anyway, it's just an interesting little thing. Why would Abraham be open to having idol worshippers from his homeland as opposed to idol worshippers from the current land that he's in? And I think there's some goodies there.
Yeah, very interesting. One of the things that you had mentioned as well, just from the beginning, you said you didn't want to go into it, but this covenant that's made by putting the hand underneath the thigh. Yeah, so what's the euphemism? You got to go there.
Yeah. Okay. So
and I guess just give us the setup.
For our members who love the church and who have kids, maybe this is not the one, but it appears to be, from all the commentators I've read, that it has something to do with the touching of the genitals of these patriarchs. Israel on his deathbed has the same thing. It's the only 2 times it's used in the Bible, but hand under the thigh is a euphemism for kind of touch my genitals.
Which would just
we know it's not sexual,
but it's like representative of the seed, right?
I think here it must be. Or it could be, because a lot of times cultural things enter the biblical story without us knowing why they've come in. It's just a statement of fact. Like, this is what's happening. So we get this with circumcision too. Like, circumcision is performed in that area. So it's not unique to Christianity or unique to Judaism, I should say. But yeah, this may be that it's just a way that older men make covenants with people. Like, it may be that. But we notice it's only older men. So it's not sexual at all in nature. It has something to do with legacy. It has something to do with maybe the children, because it's connected to Rebecca. But we don't really know why. We don't get a lot of information on it. We just know that it's an uncomfortable way of making a pact.
Okay, fair enough.
Super strange way of making a pact.
Fair enough. It is what it is, and it probably came from the culture. It was like,
that's
most likely it didn't get pulled from nowhere. There's no way God did not orchestrate this or call it about.
Yeah, we don't see anywhere in Scripture where God says this is the way that you make a covenant.
Okay. And then later on in the sermon, you mentioned that when, I guess we kind of already talked about it, like how Abraham sent his servant back home. Yeah. And that there's all this symbolism of what that means that you didn't dive into exactly, but why he wouldn't have wanted them to go through.
So the servant can go back, but Isaac can't go back.
Right.
So there's two theories why this might be the case. One theory is he almost lost his son a couple of chapters earlier as he almost sacrificed him. So one thought might be, I'm not letting the boy go. Like, I'm just not going to do it. Like, he's my son. I'm not going to do it. That's one.
Kind of like Benjamin going into.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And you can start looking at the other patriarchs and going, oh wait, they have similar like stories. Like, there's breadcrumbs left all over the place for us to think about. So that's one way. You're talking about Benjamin not going back into Egypt when Joseph is sold as a slave, and that whole story, and when he calls for Benjamin to come back. So there's one idea. The second idea is God has asked him to leave his homeland, to leave his relatives, to leave it all behind. And so to go back, we don't know if the servant means to take him back and to leave him up there. Like, maybe it's literally he goes back and he lives there, and he has to stay there, and that's the arc of the story, that he no longer gets the promised land. And so Abraham is keenly aware that if he goes back, this is what Hebrews 11 says, if they go back, they would have had the opportunity to return. And so not even offering him the way to go back, I actually think about Luke chapter 9, when Jesus says, anybody who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for service in the kingdom of God. Right. And then you have the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, who are leaving Gomorrah, and she looks back, and she's turned Lot's wife is turned to a pillar of salt. And so you have all this symbolism of, like, if God calls you out of something, you don't go back. And so I think there's something there, but it may also be as simple as he doesn't want to let go of his son, because he is truly so precious to him. And
yet he'll go back there to get the wife. The wife's still going to come from that place.
And also Jacob will go back and get a wife there too.
Right. Very true.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. They're going to make this trip at least one more time.
Yeah. And so you were also mentioning being the longest chapter in the Torah.
Yeah.
That there's 3 times it's repeated. Essentially, the narrative
story
of it. Mm-hmm. And it almost makes me think, like, okay, we got to find what's here. There's something so important. And do you have thoughts on that? Because you kind of encapsulated it into our lives as followers of Jesus, that God will go before us. He will send his way. He will make that path for us. And this is what you foresee as being why it's like this, where the angel doesn't physically show up, is because this is what's going to be propagated to the rest of us as we follow.
Yeah, I mean, that's my view of the narrative, because I think what's interesting is Abraham says the angel will go before you. Then the servant repeats that same phrase when retelling the story. The servant will go before you. That's verse 40. He says, the angel will, Abraham said the angel will go before me. My master said the angel will go before me. And look what's happened. And so he understands it as the angel has gone before him. And I think that is the reason why he is so eager to tell the story. It's like, this is his personal testimony. This is him saying, yeah, look, Abraham said that God would be with me and that God would lead me and God would guide me. And look what he's done.
Yeah.
And for us, we might think, oh, that was a coincidence. But I think the narrative arc is trying to tell you, this is God going before you.
Yeah.
God achieving these wonderful things in your life are his angel being sent before you. And that's why I think the story has this, it's maybe more than any of the other accounts we've read, at least in the last couple of weeks, this one feels the most us now. This feels, because I'm not Abraham, right?
Yeah.
I'm not that special, and I'm not Isaac. I'm not that cool. Like I'm not going to be Jacob and wrestle with God physically, but I can be like the servant who God calls on a mission to do something special, and I just move forward, and God directs my steps, and I can tell the testimony of his great work.
You know what I love about that too, and it lines up with, okay, this is a normal guy. He is not a patriarch.
Yep.
And so if we are to take from this, it is also, as you described, the framework of which most of us see how God moves in our lives. You know, when we see
Precisely.
And repetitive, it's like, this is how I'm going to do it, so that you know how to look for God almost. Like, obviously God's sovereign. He speaks to us in a multitude of creative ways depending on his relationship with you. But we all have this commonality that God moves. It's like, when you feel close to God and like things happen and things just line up, sometimes again, you can't explain it to somebody, but you know that was the hand of God that just linked that together for you. And it's almost like maybe that's the repetition, like pay attention here. This is going to be really important.
That's exactly it. I think when the scriptures are repeated, that the line pay attention could go before each of those lines. Like when we see a line in scripture that is like repeated again and again, what we should be thinking is pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, would you just hold on and pay attention? And the story is us. This is our story. It's a story of God moving in our lives, or rather the story of the way that God moves in our lives. And we see it in this text so clearly, and so and it's not just clear, but it's in a way that's reflective of the way that we live.
Yeah. And it kind of goes into this idea of free will. You know, because I mean, he's praying, and before he's done praying, Rebecca's there. So what's he praying for?
Yeah.
You know, like, But I mean, he also had a 4-month journey that he's showing his faithfulness to God and talking to God. I'm sure he didn't not talk to him from, all the way until going back to what, Ur?
Yeah.
You know?
We don't know exactly where, because that's also an interesting thing. Like, where is his homeland? Right? He left Ur to go to Haran, and there they are again. But then there's some different names and some new. So we're not exactly sure. Like, all of that whole journey is a bit convoluted, let's say. Or like not as clear as it maybe could be. There's some interesting work done by some commentators that talk about the rivers. That, like, I think the word. I'm wrong. Someone should research it, and maybe you could drop it in the comments. But like, that the word is where the two rivers meets, or something like that. The place he lands is where the two rivers meet, and it's like, so that's the Tigris and the Euphrates. So we're talking about near Eden, something near an Eden place. So anyway, it's all these these things.
Those are important in different ways, like in the way that Tim Mackey would go into.
Exactly.
It brings it back to the garden.
He's the best. He's the best at this.
Okay. So, but going back to this
free will, yes. Okay, so I think more than free will and God's sovereign direction and orchestration, there's a thing associated to that is not quite that, which is the thought about God's sovereign choice. So, does God choose Rebecca? Had she been chosen since the beginning of time? And that is it's the servant's job just to be a part of God's will in that way. It's like, I like thinking of it this way. Like, God has like points in history that are his directive. Like, he's decided this will be this, and this will be this, and this will be this. And it's our will, free will, our libertarian free will to be associated with God's plan. So would Rebecca have been chosen regardless of the servant's decision to go there? I believe so. but it was the servant's free will decision to be included in God's sovereign plan. That's the way I think about it. I'm what they call a Molinist. So if you want to study that out, you can read it out and like figure it all out. But yeah, it's hard to navigate that. But I think if you think about Rebecca being God's choice, like she is the person God chooses, then you start thinking, well, then who gets to be a part of God's purpose? Well, it's the servant. And so if God chooses my next door neighbor down the street to be saved or for the gospel to come to them or whatever, then you think, well, who gets the privilege of doing the work of connecting my next door neighbor? I get the privilege of doing that work. And in my obedience, I can be a part of God's sovereign plans.
Yeah, so she's the pinpoint in this example, and then we get to work into this framework. I'm envisioning a guy who's like trying to make all the links, but on his board, and he's got yarn going between.
Yes.
But it says, in the Word, it says he works all things together after the counsel of his own will.
Yeah.
And that just for me elevated like his will, like everything falls in line with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Like that will, everything is falling in line with that, and that is how he's doing his plan. And maybe it does fall, but the idea when people want to say that you don't have free will, it's a very different experience when you're with God and you experience those things, and you're not with God. Just from my own life, when I'm not near God and I don't experience those things, it's not like this when people say, okay, so do you have free will? It is a freeing, amazing experience to go through that. Yeah. It's not this idea of like being constrained. It's completely the opposite. And it's a wonderful thing because you are having that confirmation that God is alive and moving and with you independently.
Yeah.
Just you.
It's really, I'll tell you, the Bible appears to say both that you have total free will and also that God is completely sovereign and does as he wishes. It appears to say both super clearly. And this is very hard. This is why I think at the end of Romans 11, there's that doxology, because from 9, 10, and 11, Paul is trying to unpack God's sovereign choices mixed with men's will. He's going to mention Jacob and Esau before they had done anything good or evil. I said, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. So it has nothing to do with man's choice. And then you're like, wait, well, hold on, what? And if it has nothing to do with my choice, then what, should I go on sinning? It's like, hold on. Like there's all these arguments back and forth. And that's why the doxology at the end, I think, is so important, because he's going, I don't know, like praise God.
When you say doxology,
so he has that praise at the end of Hebrews 11. Oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom of the knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his path.
I thought that was a song.
That we wrote. But like how unsearchable his judgment.
Right.
And his paths beyond tracing out.
Wow.
Like who has ever known the mind of God?
Wow.
Like that's like after you talk about free will versus God's sovereign choice, you go, I don't know, I'm trying my hardest to understand it, but I can't understand it. And his thoughts are higher than my thoughts, and his ways are higher than my ways. And it leads you towards a higher view of God and a higher praise of God. In fact, this story has a lot to do with our free will and God's sovereign choice. But the next one has even more to do with God's sovereign choice and free will. We're going from here. We're going to Jacob and Esau and the selling of his birthright, Esau selling of his birthright. We're doing that whole thing. And the Bible has a lot to say about these two brothers. In Genesis, it appears like they are making choices that later on, God will say he made the choice for them. Again, there's a lot there that maybe we'll talk about next week.
All right, cool. So any other thoughts that you want to wrap up?
No, dude, this is awesome.
Okay, cool. I just love the idea of, I feel like it takes the pressure off. Sometimes we put it on ourselves if we haven't done something or we felt prompted by God and we didn't do something. It's like we missed this opportunity for maybe somebody's salvation or something. No, God's going to call those people as it is. But you did miss an opportunity to walk with God at those points. So it's still, we want to lean in, but don't have all the guilt about it.
You missed your chance. And I think this is the greatest thing. Like God knows what he's doing. And God will choose people to be used for his good purposes. And if you are chosen and you are given an opportunity to do it, like that is the greatest gift in the world, to be chosen by God to do wonderful things that are already in his will. And so like, I've shared this before, but like, you might remember, like you might think about your life as like, the way I think about my life as a Christian is when I was like a kid, my mom would take me like shopping, and she'd like stick you in the cart. She'd like be pushing you around, right? And every once in a while she'd be like, grab that cereal box. Like I grabbed the cereal box and I put it in the cart. And I thought as a kid I was doing something, but I didn't get pushed to the right cart, to the right aisle. I didn't select the right cereal box. All I was asked was just to reach up, grab it, and put it in the case. As a Christian, or in the cart. As a Christian, I feel like that's what my life is.
Yeah.
I'm in the cart, being pushed by my Father, and every once in a while he goes, hey, talk to that guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like what a great opportunity
Yeah.
I have to be used by my Father.
I love that visual. It's wonderful. And because when I see my kids doing stuff like that, they get so much joy out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing to be taken. It's only to be given to them. It's an opportunity. But awesome. Thank you. Look forward to Jacob and Esau.
Yeah,
brother.
no doubt, dude.